Hey, what up? Good morning. So, I had a couple things. Been busy. Life has been good, all in all. I had some things taken care of, and I'm really happy with the results. Everything can be a battle sometimes. You know, how you classify the way that the world works in your purview. You know, for me, a lot of things have been battles. You know, it's not so easy to just get from point A to point B. Sometimes point A to point B has a lot of obstacles in the way. So let's become little pit stops so that it goes A, B, C, D, E, and then F to get to B, you know, or subtext, whatever it is. Anyway, just getting a little workout. I recommend that you do that on a regular basis, or as often as you can at least. Helps you, you know, to kind of get that aggression out and to get through a lot of problems. Today I wanted to talk about part two. Now I know I've been kind of sporadic, completely sporadic in doing these videos. I don't work on getting better, but you know, life happens. So you do what you can with the time you have. So one of the things I'd like to talk about right now is just, I had a part one was moral and political nihilism. What is nihilism? Kind of going through that. The next part I want to talk about is egoism, rational and ethical egoism. So, rational egoism, also called rational selfishness, is the principle that an action is rational if and only if it maximizes one's self-interest. Also, contribution to self-interest permits an action, or perhaps is sufficient to make an action rational, but is not necessary for an action to be rational. And ethical egoism is defined as an ethical theory according to which moral decision making should be guided entirely by self-interest. I'm gonna have a little dialogue on this one. It's kind of complex. It's kind of simple at the same time. Essentially, what they're saying, in my own words, or what I kind of surmise, is that it is only moral and just that you act entirely out of self-interest. You don't need to justify it. You don't need to rationalize it. That you are serving your self-interest is a moral absolute. There are lots of people that act this way. I think maybe we all do to some degree. But allow yourself the space to question that. I had a theory about this. So, you know, so like Ayn Rand was a big proponent of this. If you're not familiar with Ayn Rand, she wrote the book When Atlas Shrugged, or Atlas Shrugged. I don't think it was a when. Essentially, it purports that the idea that the free market, you know, you would call capitalism, acts entirely out of self-interest, and that it's moral and just that we do that. It is only moral and just that we do that. Those are the only moral and just actions that a person can take, is anything that is done out of self-interest. The ethical dilemma is what is self-interest? And I think a lot of people will have different definitions of that, right? I understand that there is a need for variability within a clause, within a subsection of morals, right? That people can act out of self-interest, but when we define that, there needs to be some more concrete, some more objectivity or objection, or an objective reality or truth that we can use to substitute the subjective reality, right? And then we have to weigh out what self-interest versus desire. You know, one thing that I made a correlation to this is, I thought, sufficient. Maybe it's not. I don't know. You be the judge. A drug-addled person, or an addict rather, not just drug addict. An addict is going to act out of desire rather than self-interest. And then they'll misconstrue it into be their self-interest. So, for example, like the addict chooses the drug out of desire rather than to flee from the addiction out of self-interest. And you have to figure out that there are two different objects in this, or two different objectives in this. We conflate desire with self-interest. Um, I have a hard time with this one. I've been having a hard time trying to make this video because it's kind of difficult to kind of relate the two. So I came up with that concept. The addict will choose their addiction over fleeing from their addiction out of desire versus self-interest. Now, it can be played out so many different ways, but I thought that was a very, very relevant one, so I just stuck with that. You hear a lot of days, vote in your self-interest, vote for yours, it's in your best interest. And people say, well, it's your best interest to do this or best interest to do that. And I suppose that only you can determine what that is, but there has to be some objective reality and some evidence to support that claim. Like if I punch a punching bag 100 times a day, but I break my hand every time I do it, is it in my best self-interest? Yes, I'm learning how to box, and I'm learning how to hit the speed bag, and I'm hitting it real well, and I'm kind of going through the motions to knock that out. And it's good for me, but I keep breaking my hand at the end of it, because of bad form or so on and so forth. Someone might just say, well, get a better speed bag, or to get better form, I'm rambling. The idea is that the ends justify the means as long as it serves in the interest of the self. I don't think that that's true. I don't think that that's necessarily true. The ends don't justify the means all the time, and not 100% of the time. And I try to go towards absolutes to things. And I don't think that I'm the most moralistic individual in the world, but I do believe in an absolute objective reality, an absolute truth. I don't purport to know what that is specifically, in all actuality, but I think that it's important that we maintain a certain frame of mind that there is and act accordingly. We will make errors in our judgment, we'll make lapses in judgment, but essentially we have to weigh out if the self-interest is actually good for us or not. And you have to know the difference between desire and self-interest. It's hard. It's very complicated to think about. So many people do things out of what they purport to be their self-interest. Say you sell drugs for a living. It's in your best self-interest to make money, and since it's the quickest way to make money to get you or your family out of a situation, it's my self-interest. Well, they have the opposite, where you get in trouble with the law and you get arrested, and then it's not in your self-interest to do that. And there's some moral, there's some ambiguity there. To a certain degree, simply because somebody doesn't get caught doesn't mean that they won't get caught, and so they their self-interest and they never got caught and they made a bunch of money. Well, maybe that's true, or they're hurting other people in their community or their family members even, and so then is it in their self-interest to do that? There's wiggle room there, and when you're trying to get closer to an absolute, you have to consider so many different things. I don't think that it's moral or just or right to necessarily act entirely out of self-interest. Christianity is unique. I'm going to shift gears here. It just came to me. Jesus Christ has said that the least in the world is first in heaven. And he specifically called on John the Baptist and said he is the greatest among you, and yet in this world he is the least among you. He is entirely selfless and gives his all glory to God and to Jesus Christ, the Son. And you have to ask, if we're being objective here, and trying to, is he acting entirely out of self-interest? I think there's a weird conundrum there. Was he acting truly selflessly, or was he acting out of his interest? And God only knows that, but that is a strange thing. Did he choose to be least in the world to better serve the king, for himself, so that he had a spot at the right hand of God? I don't think so. I'm just, coming up with something here. I think he truly loved the Lord and gave up his own life in service to the Lord selflessly. Some might say, well, it was so that he could become, go to heaven, and that's out of self-interest. And maybe that's true. I don't think so. Just that's my take on it. But it's interesting that we do things out of our own purported self-interest, so we can't quite clearly define what those are. Um, and Christ calls for us to give up our own interests in pursuit of His interests. In doing that, you have to wonder: I mean, are you acting out of your own self-interest to go to heaven, or are you doing it out of love for Jesus Christ? Now, He knows that. And it's interesting. Like, I don't want to go to hell. I'd rather go to heaven. Most everybody would think that. If you do or don't believe it, and if you had to come up with a scenario where you had to say, well, God is real, or maybe He is. If He is real, I'd rather go to heaven than hell. If I don't believe in that, or so on and so forth, whatever. But are you doing that service out of self-interest, or are you doing it for His interest in giving up your own? I think there is an actual difference here in the biblical sense, in the word, is that He knows the difference. Like, if you do everything for Him, but you're doing it out of self-interest, I wonder if He even accepts or rejects that. I'm going completely off the rails here, and I'm sorry. But maybe not entirely off the rails, but nonetheless, I think you have to weigh out self-interest and try to rule out everything that you do in your life out of self-interest. I don't think that it serves you well, personally. This is a hard video to come up with, because it is in your best interest to choose, say, a good wife, or the right house, or to live a healthy lifestyle, to do for your kids, to do. But I think there comes a certain point where you have to ask yourself, is it enough to do things out of your self-interest? Like, I don't necessarily believe that it's in my best interest to give, a bum on the street $100. Like, it doesn't serve me any purpose. Maybe it's a feel good, maybe it's not. I think a lot of the times it's a selfless act. Like, I don't give money expecting anything in return. For example, I don't loan friends money. I wouldn't recommend that you loan your friends money ever. I'm not saying don't give your friends money, just don't expect it back if you did that. I've been burned on that. It makes business with pleasure. Your friends are a relationship. If you give them money, that's one thing. Don't expect it back. I've lent people money before with a promissory note. Never got it back. Ruined their friendship and relationship. Was it in my best interest to do that at that point? No, it wasn't. I was trying to be friendly, but I expected some, compensation back. Not necessarily compensation, but to get my money back at least. I didn't do it for a reward. So maybe a scenario like that would play against me. I didn't act in my best interests and lent that money out, hoping that I would get it back. I never did. It wasn't in my best interest. Maybe there's a case right there that I should act only and entirely out of my self-interest. Ultimately, you have to discover that for yourself, and I would definitely recommend searching oneself to find out if you're acting out of desire or if you're acting out of self-interest. Being able to define and divide and define the two as accurately as humanly possible. And then on the flip side, in what ways does acting selflessly benefit you, or does it benefit somebody else, and what is the risk reward there? So if you're a nihilist, I'm going to jump back into the nihilism. You're doing things kind of willy-nilly. The next step is the rational egoism. As anything I'm doing is just doing out of self-interest, it kind of creates a selfishness complex, an egoist prospect. That's what's called rational egoism. I think ego hurts us in most situations. Sometimes it helps us, but I think too much ego hurts us in the long run. If you have too much ego, it destroys you. It destroys yourself. It destroys your sense of self. It destroys your relationships with others. It destroys your purview on the world to have a more objective worldview versus a subjective. you're not the master and arbiter of truth. Maybe to, theoretically under yourself that's the case because your perspective is reality. To say, this is something worth saying, but at the same time, we're flawed creatures, so we're not going to be right 100% of the time. Baseball's interesting because the best batters, the best batters bat 300, 30%. They hit the ball 30% of the time, 33% of the time. That's a great stat, which is strange because they only hit the ball 30% of the time, and yet they're hyper successful in life, if you will, or at that sport. Leave room for error, and definitely make time to reflect on that. Did you act out of desire? Did you act out of self-interest? Or did you act selflessly, without ego? I wonder. One thing that you can do to kill the ego is to kill your desire for the greater, or the greater, grander things in life, and do what you think is right. Have a constitution laid out. Too much ego will destroy you. So I don't necessarily completely disagree with rational egoism. At the same time, I do what I can to reject it because I don't want to become compromised emotionally out of ego. It's a balancing act there. Maybe this is a shit video. Probably is. I was ill prepared for it, but I wanted to make it anyway. ADHD is running wild today. Had a little workout and trying to get it together up here to make sense of it. But yeah, this was kind of like a last minute, let me just put this video together. I'll probably revisit the subject at another time, but I want to get on with this series, and I figured if I'd put something out, it'd be better than putting nothing out at all. So I'm working on it. I hope that you find this video helpful, useful. If not, critique the shit out of me and destroy me in the comments, or tell me I did a shitty job, as I think I did. And God bless you. I hope you have a great day. All right, bye.